Prime Minister. Closed question number one, Dr. Julian Lewis.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We assess our defence spending constantly as to whether it meets our obligations and keeps our country safe. As figures published last month show, we are meeting the 2% NATO target this year.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
As the Prime Minister and indeed the Chancellor know, quality is not the issue with our armed forces, but quantity is. Given that we used to spend regularly between 4 and 5% of GDP on defence when we last faced a threat on the continent and a major terrorist campaign, should we not be aiming at a 3% target rather than the bare NATO minimum figure?
The point I'd make to my honourable friend, he's right, we do face very severe threats in our world, is the only way to have strong defence is to have a strong economy. That is absolutely key. We made some very clear commitments about the size of our armed forces, about the successor to the Trident submarine, and also the vital equipment programme where we have the aircraft carriers and the other equipment vital to our armed services that are coming through. Those things are only possible because we closed the deficit in our MOD and the mess that we found when we became the government, and we have a strong economy.
Harriet Harman.
10 years ago, the 7/7 bombers cruelly took 52 precious lives. We remember them, the families' courage and the injured, and we defy the terrorists. Mr. Speaker, last month, the Prime Minister celebrated the Magna Carta, which set out that those who govern must be constrained in their exercise of power to protect those they govern. Our Human Rights Act is the very embodiment of those values. If he accepts that in a democracy there needs to be an effective check on executive power, even though at times it can be uncomfortable for government, will he abandon his plans to water down the Human Rights Act?
Well, first of all, can I very much agree with the Right Honourable Lady with what she said about 7/7, about the 10-year anniversary, about the bravery and the dignity of those families that lost their loved ones. And she, like I, took part in the commemorations yesterday that I thought were fitting and a permanent reminder to the threat we face and the work we must do to face down the evil of these terrorists and their narrative of extremism. The point she makes about the Magna Carta, I would say, demonstrates that there were human rights before the Human Rights Act. And the point I would make is our proposed reform is to have a British Bill of Rights so that more of these judgments are made by British judges in British courts. But as I've said at this dispatch box before, no one should be in any doubt when it comes to issues like prisoner voting and things like that. I am clear these issues should be decided in this House of Commons. I think it's vital. So let's pass a British Bill of Rights. Let's give more rights to these things to be decided in British courts. And let's recognise we had human rights in this country long before Labour's Human Rights Act.
Harriet Harman.
I don't know what it says in his briefing folder, but he's completely wrong on that. Since 2010, the number of people taking part in sport has gone down, and children at school are doing less sport too. Does he agree that what we now need is a proper national strategy for sports participation, so we don't miss the golden opportunity presented by the Olympics, an opportunity his government is so far squandering?
Right. Are we, if we're sitting comfortably, there are 1.4 million more people playing sport once a week than when we won the bid to host the Olympic Games. Right. The recent Active People survey...
They don't know. Order! Mr. Bryant, you are now an esteemed member of Her Majesty's Opposition Shadow Cabinet. Well, whether he's esteemed or not, he's a member of the Shadow Cabinet. The Prime Minister.
Well, he might be esteemed by you, Mr. Speaker, but some of us take a different view. As a result of the PE and school sports premium, average time spent on PE at primary level has increased to over 2 hours a week. 91% of schools have reported an increase in the quality of PE teaching. 96% of schools have reported... I know they don't like facts, but when they ask a factual question, they should welcome a factual answer. I've got all day, Mr. Speaker.
However long it takes, the answer will be heard.
There's not much else on today, Mr. Speaker, so there have been consultations with the head of that committee, and there's plenty of time. And I have to say to Labour, at least we published an English manifesto. Now look,
Harriet Harman.
We agree there's a problem, and we agree at last week's Prime Minister's questions. He actually said, we'll publish our proposals shortly and Parliament will have plenty of time to consider and vote on them. And, you know, he can't have consulted the Procedure Committee because it hasn't even been set up yet. So
I think the Labour Party, frankly, has got to get off the fence and tell us, do you support this modest proposal or not? We're still waiting for an answer.
Chris Davis.
Question 2, Mr. Speaker.
I have meetings with Cabinet colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today. We are consulting the whole of the House of Commons, and the whole of the House of Commons will have a vote. And I think when the House of Commons comes to have its vote, it might want to consider what the leader of the Scottish National Party said back in 2007. You might find this interesting. He said this to the then Prime Minister in 2007: "Is it not completely iniquitous that English MPs are not able to decide matters in Scotland, but Scottish MPs from the UK parties can vote on matters which only impact on England?" That was the view. Now, given that our modest proposal would actually restrict the SNP from far fewer votes than their own self-denying ordinance does, I would think they should vote wholeheartedly with the government on this modest proposal.
Michelle Donnellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Prime Minister knows, my constituency of Chippenham covers 4 market towns, but our high streets have declined under years of Labour's neglect. What support can the Prime...
Order! The order! The Honourable Lady must be heard, and she will be.
Prime Minister offer market towns like Corsham, Chippenham, Melksham and Bradford-on-Avon?
Well, first of all, let me welcome my honourable friend to her place. I do know her constituency well and spend a lot of time there with her before the election. What I'd say to her is the offer of devolution is not limited to cities. We're just as open to proposals from towns, counties and districts. But I'd say what we need to help our high streets is a strong economy, to press ahead with these local plans, to have deregulation of the class orders that sometimes prevents development taking place. And I would also argue, in the case of market towns, we should make parking easier and preferably free.
Sir Roger Gale.
Speaker, when my right honourable friend speaks to President Hollande in the immediate future, will he make it plain that he expects that the port of Calais will be kept open now and in the future for lawful travel in both directions?
I think my honourable friend makes a very important point. I had a very good discussion with President Hollande last week. I think we have seen more action by the French police in terms of arresting the ringleaders and trying to keep roads and ports open. As I've said at this dispatch box before, I think it's important we don't engage in finger-pointing with the French. We recognise this is a shared problem. Our juxtaposed border controls in Calais work well for Britain and, I believe, can work well for France, and we should continue to work together to deal with this problem.
Okay.
I'm told, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister may shortly be planning a vote using evil to repeal our hunting laws. Will this be a case of English hunting for English foxes?
No, it'll be an opportunity for the House, as we were talking about earlier, an opportunity for the House of Commons to debate an issue and then have a vote. I don't know what everyone else came here for, but I think that's quite a good idea.
Heather Wheeler!
Derbyshire is at the heart of the Midlands engine powering the economy of the country. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I think I've lost my voice.
Justin Madders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was surprised to learn in response to questions from myself and others that the government doesn't actually know where the Northern Powerhouse is. So, given the...
George is selling it! George is selling it! Tell him, George!
Order! We do have a bit of other business to get on to, but the honourable gentleman must be heard. Mr. Madders.
So, given the recent cancellation or pausing of major transport projects in the north, is it not in fact the case that the only place where the Northern Powerhouse can be found is in the Prime Minister's imagination?
The truth is, the Labour Party ignored the North for years, and they cannot bear the fact that it's a Conservative Prime Minister and a Conservative Chancellor sitting for a seat in the North West that is putting these issues firmly on the agenda and funding them.